War tourism. War tourism is traveling to battlefields and frontiers where the traces of combat between the rival troops are still fresh as if the smell of cordite has just fired off a gun. War sites lure a section of tourists who are turned on by the adventure and adrenaline-pumped thrill drawn from a war tourism site. Despite the political turmoil, the clash of interests of nations with conflicting ideology and eventually the spray of ammunitions and explosions and the consequent loss of life and property and the grief associated a place of battle has a tremendous appeal on its own right. It is here where the fates of the nations had been decided. The victor emerges with its head held high and the loser gets lost in gloom and subjugates to the self-declared master. In many war-torn lands, development is in progress. Bomb pits have been turned into fish ponds. In many places, the devastated buildings and structures razed to the ground altogether have been preserved intact with modern civilization grown around. This certainly is an attraction in contrast with ghostly towns beaten by enemy assaults stand amid a strikingly contrasting and pulsating modernity. Time and again the consequences of strife and bloodbath, no matter how ugly and embarrassing it have been, the tourists pour in waves, making war tourism a powerful niche cutting a secured slot in tourism industry. Battlefields are historically significant, politically arousing and strategically offering a field of study in the realm of military science and engineering. The charred greenery and site of the armory debris, shrapnel, and exploded fragments of mines, grenades and warheads supply enough fodder to the adventure freaks having an enormous appetite for war-torn zones. Battles and wars of different magnitude and location involving different countries have been fought across the world. The results are known and their impact has left a trail of bloodshed and gun smoke that the tourist can hardly able to resist the temptation to make a visit. The battlefields of American Civil War, the Crimean War, the Waterloo, the Korean War, the desert warfare in northern Sahara, Dresden the city in Germany suffering most air assaults. The Bangladesh-Pakistan War and the Gulf War in the recent times have been major grounds inspiring war tourism among the tourists. Tourists with a good grip on war strategies quite often look for details. The geographical feature and the terrain, the landmarks, the forests, the deserts, the gorges and the hills that might have been deciding factors for a nation to win and its rival to lose. Besides guns and ammunitions, the tactics applied plays an important role in delivering the outcome. The position of the army along the terrain matters a lot. The winner had successfully employed the topography to his advantage in which the vanquished have failed. These technical details and a lot more entice the war tourism enthusiasts to plan a visit to the battle-ravaged grounds, and the kick he gets from the scene is powerful, often inspiring repeat visits. War tourism is a bit out of the way departure from other conventional forms of tourism. The usual niche tourism sector lays emphasis on the scenic beauties, cuisine and cultural marvel. Whereas, here the focus is on death and destruction in the backdrop of a conflicting political scenario and exposure to a site dotted with bomb craters, burnt woodland and apparently harmless grounds beneath where lethal mines and other ammunitions might be lying dormant to erupt someday. The danger of stepping over a mine is always there, and the tourist is very well aware of the devastating results. However, his drive for war tourism is strong enough for these threats to deter his enterprise. History of war tourism. War tourism is not a recent phenomenon. It is the man's desire that has driven him to battlefields not as a soldier, but as a spectator to watch the aftermath, which is now a history. Early visits to battlefields are illustrated with the burning example of Mary Seacole, the philanthropist from the Caribbean. Born in 1805 in the Caribbean island of Jamaica, she was a lady fired with the zeal of helping the wounded British soldiers in the Crimean War grounds. The span of the battle lasted for 2 years, running from 1854 to 1856. The intensity of the battle was tumultuous. Nevertheless, it did not deter the spirit of this great lady from fulfilling her noble mission. Neither did discouragements and criticism born out of racial discrimination force her lose her vision and grit. However, this visit was way apart from just hitting upon a war tourism site for the sake of thrill and pleasure. It was something much noble and humanitarian. It was a selfless mission. Another visit by a lady to the bloodied battlefield is exemplified by Florence Nightingale way back in the 18th century. Born British in 1820, Florence was trained as a statistician, and by profession she took to social reforms and later developed the noble profession of nursing. In the Crimean battlefields, she helped and nursed the injured soldiers with care and passion. She was nicknamed Lady with the Lamp for her habit of going rounds with a lamp in the camps of wounded soldiers attending their medical needs. She was lauded to the sky for her charity, service and sacrifices, and will remain as a legendary visit by a civilian in the ravaged Crimean battleground with a strong and undivided focus on serving war-torn humanity with love and compassion. Early viewership of American civil wars has its records as far back as in the 18th century. Some of the American warfields visited by tourists even in early days are as follows. Manassas Nation Battlefield, Virginia. Back in 1861, viewers and news journalists raced with each other for a first-rated vision of the first chief battle fought between Union and Confederate soldiers at Manassas. Prior to the battle was waged, a majority of the Americans conceived the notion that the war would barely be a brief scuffle. On the contrary, the battle turned out blood-spattered and horrible. Almost 1,000 soldiers lost their lives, and it was quite a shocking figure those days. The nation was stunned, and it was hard to swallow and comprehend that the impact was so devastating, leading to loss of human lives on a massive scale. Fort Donelson National Battlefield, Tennessee. Back in February 1862, Union General Ulysses S. Grant emerged victorious at Fort Donelson, where he was designated unconditional surrender. The African American slaves whose pain and humiliation had built up a hostile sentiment within rejoiced the victory and gathered in large numbers around the fort to mark the celebration. Drive for visiting war sites with a motive and inquisitiveness fired by thrill and information was always in our blood. It is ancient. The battles and strife provide an ideal platform to feed this desire of drawing enough kick and achieve gratification. Battles had a crucial role in altering the course of civilization down the ages. Wherever and whenever conflicts surfaced between nations over political, social and economic interests, the solution came in the shape of gory battles and wars. Throughout the ancient Rome, Mesopotamian, Egyptian and Chinese civilizations, strife, rebellions and suppression of the same with a heavy hand shaped the destiny of mankind. Not only the armed troops, but the civilians and spectators were also a part of the macabre spectacle. However, in those days battles were mainly fought in the designated frontiers, and civilians took interest in visiting the aftermath and celebrating the win. With time rolling over, the attacks shifted towards cities and towns, and the potential target was civilization. Here, the spectators and civilians no longer were safe but suffered the wreckage caused by war. Key drivers of war tourism. There has to be some terrific reasons behind the success of war tourism. What is it that drives tourists in large numbers to battlefields and frontiers once stained with human blood, polluted with gun smoke and the air filled with the cries of victory and woes of defeat? The battleground itself is a big tourist attraction. However, certain key features and the measures employed to make it look way different from an ordinary ground is a key driver. The tourists come here to look for thrill, and the place should do enough to stand apart from the rest. Like, comment, share and subscribe to my channel.